Hello everybody, it's lovely to see you as usual. Oh my gosh, so let's talk about why you need sexuality to heal, to really connect to your power, and to really step up your game in life. I will share a very personal experience here. I started doing my inner work ever since I was 12. I started working okay. So I started working on understanding my patterns, how to change it. How I was always particularly aware of my patterns and the patterns of others. That's my superpower. I could look at the big picture and see, okay, this is going on and this is why people is doing this. And I did that with myself, for starters. I could also see that. And I was a kid and I was already noticing that. Noticing why my mom was acting in a certain way, why my grandmother was acting in a certain way, what was behind their attitude, their behavior, positive or destructive. So I was deeply dedicated to this. I meditated hours. I studied with teachers, and yet again, there was a piece that was missing. And this piece that was missing was the body. Of course, I also did work with my own body. I did martial arts. I did a little bit of yoga, just a little bit, but it wasn't what I was needing. I was still deeply dissociated from my body. And so I understood eventually that no matter how much I work on myself, on understanding my own journey and changing it, I was still feeling stress, feeling angry, feeling like I didn't really belong anywhere, like I was being stagnant, like I was being, oh my gosh, it's telling me too low FPS. If somebody knows what it means, please let me know. Anyway, I was feeling stagnant in my life until I have a Kundalini awakening in 2012, and I didn't even understand what was going on. All I understood was that it was like having sex with the universe. That's how I described it to a friend. I said I felt like there was a God making love to me, and it just felt like that energy that was, and I was meditating. I wasn't doing anything sexual, but that energy just started moving through my body, and as a result, things started happening that led me eventually to Tantra and Taoism. Even before that, I was already using my jade, but I didn't really know what I was doing. So this is my story, but it has a point, and I will go there in a minute. And eventually, I started studying with Leila Martin, and everything made sense in that moment. Everything made sense. Everything started feeling differently. I had already worked with trauma, but I didn't know it was trauma. I was working with patterns. Never had I understood how deeply it is ingrained in our bodies. But then the most powerful thing happened when I did the most rebellious thing that a woman can do, which is reclaiming my pleasure. Now, pleasure used to be something that only those that didn't have any worries would do, right? That was what was in my mind. That's what I had learned from a very young age. Like, that's something that I don't have the time to do, because I have to focus on surviving, on making things happen, on my day-to-day issues, on healing, on working on myself. I was so committed to going into the depth of my psyche to heal and to do things differently, that I was also not enjoying the journey. It was painful as fuck. And then this energy of pleasure incorporated in my daily life shifted the whole paradigm. It shifted everything. And it shifted everything because all of a sudden I felt that my body was actually craving to be lived in, to be felt, to be explored, to be loved. See, spiritual people, and like so many others, like religious people, think that the body is something that we use, that it's nothing but a piece of clothing that we have to remove once we die. That idea of the body being something that we carry or that carries us, and all the fear and all the stress around it. Like, yeah, but you have to not pay too much attention to it, because if you pay too much attention to your body, you are vain. Yeah, you have to just look at yourself in the mirror in the morning when you get dressed, and that's it, or you're vain. And when women are actually vain, oh my god, the scene, the horror, she's full of herself, she must be so empty, so shallow. There is this freaking idea in which we never win, in which if women pay too much attention to their looks, to their bodies, they are shallow. And if they pay no attention to their looks, to their bodies, they are, dismissed, not validated, not seen enough, because we don't take enough care of ourselves. So I was in that trap all the way. I was in that trap. I was feeling like my body was something that I had to overcome. My sexuality was something that I had to overcome, and that the real change was through meditation and through connection with my higher self, and through this connection. And I am getting a freaking message here, and I don't know what it means. Okay, sorry. And I used to do that. That's how I lived my spirituality, and it worked for me for a long time. It worked for me until it didn't anymore. It worked for me until because I was really changing patterns that were damaging. I was really connecting and having amazing out-of-body experiences. I was I was connected to whatever, but at the end of the day, my real life, my world, was falling into pieces. It was falling into pieces. I had no control at all of my life, because I was out there. I was dissociated. I was in the spiritual realm. This world, I didn't want to have to do anything with it. So when it came to money, when it came to relationships, when it came to my sexuality, when it came to my body image, all of these pieces, I didn't want to have to do anything with them. So I didn't. I didn't connect with them. Gosh, it says too low FPS. Why? What is that? What does it mean, and how do I fix it? Anyway, if you know, please leave me a message so that I can fix this eventually in my future videos. Anyway, my body was a jail, it was a prison, but it wasn't something that I enjoyed and that I wanted to live in. From time to time, I would love it through some dance. I would hold myself through a practice of self-care that I learned at some point, but it wasn't enough. My life was showing that. You know what people say, that money and sexuality are interconnected because they are in the same chakra? It's true. When you are disconnected from your sexuality, you're also disconnected from abundance, you're also disconnected from life force flowing through you. And that's what I was doing. I was living in this world of spirituality, but I was totally dissociated from this world right here. And that was okay. I mean, that's what I knew, and that was helpful. But that wasn't fulfilling. I have a little metaphor inside this metaphor, which is, you know, when you're going to get something new, like, I just changed it was time to renovate my phone. So years ago it was like, oh my god, I'm going to get a new phone, and I was so excited about the new phone. And then when I got it, it was like, what happened? It wasn't really fulfilling at all. It was just something there, like, it wasn't really fulfilling. I think that we are living day to day waiting for something to be fulfilling. A new gadget, a new relationship, a night out with somebody. We are waiting for something to fulfill a huge gap inside of ourselves. And that's how I used to live, and that's how I know so many people live. And then the idea of pleasure shifted the whole paradigm. Because when I started doing pleasure as a meditation, as a sacred practice, when I started doing practices that could nourish, nurture, and expand that sensuality inside of my body, when I started doing practices that could connect me deeply to my body here and now, many things started happening. One of them was, I knew my trauma. I had them before. I was the kind of people that thinks, I'm not traumatized. I mean, yeah, things happened to me, but they weren't as bad as the things that have happened to other people. Yeah, well, hello dissociation. When I started getting into my body, one of the first things that was deeply surprising was that I was able to connect with my trauma, with my pain. But differently from what would have happened before that, I was able to move through it quickly. I was able to just swim through that energy, to just move through it and not be stuck in that. And that's so freaking powerful. That's so freaking powerful. And that's something that I see in my clients as well. When I start working with somebody, they also connect with their pain points or their trauma or experiences that they were dissociated from. But instead of being there for too long and holding on to that energy, they just do that walking through, that it's so powerful and magical. They just literally walk through with that energy and see the end of the tunnel quicker than they would have had they denied that experience. It's deeply transforming way of approaching that which is stuck in our bodies. So, how curious. Connecting to my body and to my pleasure led me to understanding that I had some pain that was unresolved, and I was able to connect and to move through it quickly. But that's not what we desire, right? Like, ideally, we wouldn't want to be connecting to pain. Like, why would it? Well, because it's there anyway. So, what better way than to connect with it from pleasure? That's the magic word here. We connect from pleasure. We move quickly to pleasure. What do I mean when I speak about pleasure? I mean, of course, self-pleasuring, but with consciousness and awareness. But I also mean sometimes just dancing, sometimes just punching a pillow and rolling like an animal and doing a very wild animalistic dance. There are so many different ways of experiencing pleasure, and there are so many healing ways in which that pleasure can operate. And then, what does it have to do with power? Yeah, my life was deeply disempowered because I was living in dissociation. And when I started connecting with my pleasure, there was one magical shift that started shifting everything else. There were two. I would just summarize it in two. One was my capacity to pleasure myself. If I was able of doing this magical reclamation of my energy, of feeling like a goddess, of feeling fierce like a tigress, of feeling gentle and soft and like one with the universe, if I was able to create that energy by myself, then I can do whatever I want with my life. And the second point was my capacity to desire. That totally shifted, because conscious pleasure involves desire, involves setting up a goal, a desire, a purpose, an intention. So my capacity to set up my desires. That's so curious, because that's one of the first things that we learn to stop doing. When we're children, we desire constantly. Hey, I want to party with a cake and a piñata and that. But then we start learning that desires are wrong, are dangerous. The story of Aladdin pretty much says, don't ask anything to the genie, it could be dangerous. The real story, not the Disney one. There are constantly stories about don't desire anything, because it's going to turn against you, because you're going to ask something to the universe, and the universe is going to send you something wicked in return, and just flow and detach. Then my mother is into this Hinduistic cult, because it's a cult, not the religion, but the guru that she's following. I'm sorry if she hears it. Anyway, and they promote the idea of detachment. Detach from desires. That's one of the things that they say the most, and it's not new. And I will eventually talk a little bit more about that, because there are two different branches of religion. One promotes the detachment, and the other promotes the life experience of anything in life. The one promotes desires as the voice of the spirit saying, hey, I want to live this, let's do this. I am hungry for this experience. That's the tantric road. And the other, I don't remember the name, it has an Hindu name, so it promotes the detachment. Like religion, in everywhere in the world, like detach from the world. Well, When I started working with pleasure, I learned to reconnect with my desires as the messengers of my soul. Because if I had a desire, it meant that my soul was craving an experience. And that shift in my understanding shifts everything. Everything. If I have a desire, it means my soul is craving an experience. That's what pleasure did for me. It allowed me to reconnect to that soft voice of my spirit talking through my desires, and it helped me to reconnect with my capacity to make things happen. I can make it happen. I have the power in me. Now, the trap with this is that we live in a culture that removes these factors, removes the pleasure factor, and keeps us busy and productive and doing things like, how are you? Busy. What have you been doing? Working hard, doing stuff, It's so goal oriented, which is different from desires. I am talking about desires from your soul. And our culture promotes the desires as goals. Go get this. And that's just draining eventually. And that disconnects us from pleasure and connects us with a wicked sense of duty. I am all for responsibility, but a wicked sense of duty promoted by culture says, you don't have time for pleasure, you have to work. You don't have time to, meditate, but after you do the dishes. Okay, self-pleasure after you clean the whole house. Go to the gym after you do everything in your house that needs to be done. Oh, you haven't, you can't go. It's like this reward mentality in which we feel like we cannot do the things that bring us pleasure unless we have earned them. Pretty much like pleasure is the dessert and our duties are the nutritious meal. But what would happen if pleasure was a nutritious meal? What would happen if pleasure was the dessert and the nutritious meal? Which it is. Still, and I say this often, but I cannot say it often enough. Choosing pleasure in our culture is an act of rebelliousness. It's an act of rebelliousness because we're choosing life. Because we're choosing to be the owners of our lives. Because we're choosing to not be bossed around by culture. And instead we're choosing to create the life that we dream of. And those are the people that change the world. Those are the people that change the world. The people that follow their pleasure. So, knowing all of this, and knowing how tempting it is to disconnect from pleasure, even for people like me that already know what pleasure does for my life, even for people like me that I have committed to giving myself pleasure every day in one way or another, even for people that are deeply committed to themselves and that know why it is important, sometimes we let go of pleasure in the sake of our duties. Because we have our kids at home, which I do. Because we have to work hard, which we all do. Because we have to, and we leave pleasure in the back for later, when we are free enough. But that time never comes. It's an act of rebelliousness. It's an act of saying, fuck off. I need to pleasure myself in order to remain healthy. Another time I will speak about how it helps close stress circles, but that's another thing. But I need pleasure in order to remain healthy mentally and physically and energetically. So, knowing how tempting it is to let pleasure go in the sake of whatever else, I created a once a month guided practice. It's a membership. It's a coven. I like to call it a coven because that's what it is for me. A group of powerful women, the House of the Wild, in which we connect to create pleasure once a month, so that we are not distracted by culture, so that we set up a date with ourselves and we choose that once a month, every day. I am thinking deeply of full moon, even when I had other dates in mind first, but anyway. The thing is, every month, whatever the day, every month we have an appointment with ourselves, with other group of women, so that we are accountable to choose pleasure. I guide practice that it's deeply empowering and usually aligned with what we are needing as a collective. And then you can use that practice every time of the month that you decide, because it is recorded. So that's also deeply powerful. That capacity to connect to that practice every time that you want. And it's something that it's deeply empowering for everybody in that group, and that allows us to keep choosing pleasure, because once you see the results, you keep choosing pleasure. So I wanted to make this brief. I just want to leave you below the post the link to join this powerful coven. The doors are open for a couple of weeks, and I am deeply excited to be offering this to the world, because this is the medicine that I know I need, or I needed, that I would have loved, that somebody offered me years ago, and I am offering this right now to all of you. It is deeply affordable, it is deeply empowering, and it is a beautiful way to remind ourselves of the power of this connection. So, thank you very much for listening to me. Leave me below a comment, please. I really appreciate those. And see you soon.